I did not realize at first that I had been removed from my own anniversary. It revealed itself gradually, the way most humiliations do. Quietly, with plausible deniability. My husband Daniel's family was hosting a dinner to celebrate our 10th anniversary. His mother had arranged it at a private restaurant room downtown. White tablecloths. Too many candles. The kind of place she liked because the staff already knew her name. I only learned about the dinner because Daniel mentioned it casually while scrolling through his phone. "Mom's organizing something tonight," he said. "Just family." I waited. There's a specific pause people leave when they expect you to fill in the part that doesn't make sense. "Tonight?" I asked. "Yeah, and I'm supposed to come?" He looked uncomfortable in a way that wasn't loud enough to be called guilt. She just thought it might be easier if it stayed small. Small. 10 years of marriage translated into a word that could erase me without sounding cruel. I nodded, mostly because I was used to the rhythm by then. His mother had spent a decade editing my presence in small ways. Seating arrangements that placed me at the edge of tables. Introductions where I became Daniel's friend. Photographs where I somehow ended up holding the camera. You learn to absorb those things quietly, at least for a while. Later that afternoon, a message arrived from Daniel's cousin. A screenshot, no explanation attached, just a seating chart from the restaurant. At the center table, Daniel Whitaker and Clara Bennett. The note beside it read, "Introduction Dinner." Clara. I recognized the name vaguely, daughter of one of his mother's closest friends. Someone she used to mention in the tone people reserve for hypothetical daughters-in-law. For a few minutes I stared at the screen, trying to understand the logistics of replacing someone who was still legally married to the man involved. It wasn't rage that came first, it was clarity. Not the dramatic kind, just a calm realization that the humiliation had finally crossed into something structural, public, intentional. Daniel hadn't asked me to leave. He had simply allowed the story to be rewritten around my absence. I sat at the kitchen table and made 2 phone calls. The first one took 6 minutes. The second took 12. The paperwork had already existed. I had drafted it months earlier during a period when Daniel and I were supposed to be working on things. I never finalized it because I kept thinking the marriage might still shift back towards something recognizable. But the anniversary dinner made timing efficient. By the time evening arrived, the decision no longer felt emotional. Just administrative. The restaurant was exactly the type of place his mother preferred. Soft lighting. Expensive quiet. Through the glass, I could see the private dining room already full. His mother stood near the head of the table greeting guests with that particular smile she used when performing generosity. Daniel sat beside a woman I assumed was Clara. She leaned toward him politely as if she had been given careful instructions about how the evening should unfold. No one looked distressed, which meant the story was proceeding exactly as planned. I walked inside. There was no announcement, no dramatic entrance, just the small interruption of a person appearing where they were not expected to exist. A few relatives noticed first, heads turned, conversations thinned out around the edges of the room. Daniel's mother saw me last. Her smile stayed in place, but something behind it stalled. "Oh," she said lightly, as though I had wandered into the wrong wedding. "I didn't realize you were coming tonight." The phrasing was delicate, neutral enough that anyone unfamiliar with the situation might assume I had misunderstood the invitation. "I know," I said. A quiet shift passed through the room. Daniel stood halfway, uncertain whether this moment required loyalty or distance. Clara looked between us politely, like someone trying to locate the correct social script. Behind me, the door opened again. 2 people entered. One was my attorney. The other was the financial compliance officer from Whitaker Holdings, the family company Daniel's mother had run for nearly 20 years. They approached the table with the kind of calm that signals something official is about to happen. Folders were placed in front of Daniel and his mother. For a moment, no one spoke. My attorney addressed them first. "Earlier today," she said evenly, "Mrs. Whitaker finalized the transfer of her controlling shares into a restricted trust structure." Daniel frowned. His mother didn't move. "My shares had come from my father when he passed away." Quietly, without ceremony, The family company had always framed itself as Daniel's inheritance, but the financial stability underneath it had belonged to me for years. I had never used that leverage, until now. The compliance officer slid another document forward. Effective immediately, he said, executive decision authority has been restructured. Neither of you will retain controlling operational influence. Silence fell across the table. Not shocked silence, the heavier kind. The kind where people are recalculating the structure of a reality they assumed was permanent. My attorney placed the final envelope in front of Daniel. Additionally, she said, these are the formal divorce filings. Daniel looked up at me then, properly, for the first time that evening, as if trying to understand how the person who had tolerated 10 years of careful humiliation had become the one delivering documents. I didn't feel triumphant, just finished. I looked around the table. Thank you all for coming tonight, I said quietly. It's still our anniversary dinner after all. No one laughed. His mother stared at the papers without touching them. Her composure had not shattered. It had simply stopped functioning. Clara sat very still, like someone who had accidentally walked into the middle of a legal seminar. I nodded once, mostly out of habit. Then I left the room before anyone decided how they were supposed to react. Outside, the air felt colder than I expected. For a long time I stood on the sidewalk without moving. There was no surge of victory, no dramatic sense of revenge, just a strange quiet. For 10 years, I had been adjusting myself to fit into someone else's version of family. Tonight, for the first time, the adjustment stopped. The consequences would arrive later. Conversations, stories, blame shifting through the extended family like weather patterns. But the central fact would remain unchanged. I was no longer waiting for permission to exist in my own life.